So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take a drawing from your sketchbook and convert it into a more highly realized sketch for concept art, for something that you might want to show to a client. Anyway, the first thing we're going to do is open up Photoshop, and I'm going to be going into a folder that I already have selected here. It's called Character Design from Scans, and what they are is a bunch of pages that I scanned from one of my sketchbooks. We're going to select this drawing here. It's called CA08. CA is for Concept Art, and what we have here is a very simple drawing of a character. And what I'm going to be doing is showing you in a few short steps how we can take this sketch and convert it to something that you might want to show to a client if you're working on game design or some animation concepts or book concepts or whatever. Anyway, so we have our drawing open. I'm just going to enlarge it a little bit. And you can see what we have here. In fact, I'll go even further. You can see it's a very rough sketch. It's not hasn't even been cleaned up yet, and we're going to leave it in this state because we're not really concerned with having a highly polished, finished piece of art. What what we want here is just to show something very spontaneous and well designed. Anyway, so here we have our black and white pencil sketch, and the first thing I'm going to do is convert it to a more brownish color. The end effect, what we're trying to achieve here is to have sort of like a sanguine chalk drawing on charcoal paper, the kind of thing that you might have done in figure drawing when you were a student or when you were an earlier student. So first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the background layer. And I always duplicate the background layer because I like to have the original art still within the files in case I ever need to go back to it. Usually you don't, but just for safety's sake, I like to have it. Anyway, so we have the background copy here in our layers palette. So I'm going to go into image, and I'm going to go to adjust, and the first thing I'm going to do is go into color balance. All right, so we have a dialog box here, and it has three sliders going from cyan to red, magenta to green, yellow to blue, and we also have down here in the bottom some boxes that say shadows, midtones, and highlights. Midtones are the default that Photoshop has for this. And we have the preserve luminosity box checked. So we're going to leave that checked, and what we're going to do is we're also going to ignore highlights because you're going to see in a few minutes that what tends to happen is when we start playing with these sliders, it's going to change the color of the gray lines. So I don't want to change the color of the white, the highlights. So what I really just want to be concerned about is the gray. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to stay in midtones, and we're just going to slide the top slider over towards the reds. I have it all the way over, but really this is a matter of personal preference. Then I went down to the yellow, gave it a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of green. Now I'm going to go into the shadows option, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm not going to go all the way over with the red because I don't want it to be too red. So we'll go about a little beyond the midway point, a little bit more in the yellow, some green, maybe just a teeny bit more red, and I'm going to click OK. And you could see in a very short period of time we've managed to convert our pencil drawing into what looks like a reasonable facsimile of a red sanguine chalk. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a blank layer. So I have my empty layer here, and what I'm trying to do now is I'm going to try and create something that's going to resemble charcoal paper. I'm going to just shut this layer off for now. So I'm going to go into the color picker, and I'm going to try to come up with a beige color, something that mimics what we've seen in charcoal paper. So I don't want to go too dark, I don't want to go too light. It can always be changed later on, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to select this beige color here, and I'm going to go over to the paint bucket tool, and we're just going to fill this layer completely with that color. The next thing we're going to do is go into filter. We're going to go into filter noise, and we're going to go into add noise. Now I've already got it in the adjustment box here. I have my amount set to 9.51. Anything below around 9 or 10% is good for the purposes that we have here. All we really want to do is break up that solid color. So you'll notice also in the distribution box I have Gaussian check, not uniform, and I've also got the monochromatic option selected. Now this document, this original document, is 300 dpi. It's approximately 8.5 by 11. So these numbers here are just about right for the document that we're working on. So I'm going to click OK, and now we have our noise set, but it's still for the purposes of this, I feel it's a little bit too computerized, too sharp. So one final thing we're going to do in preparation for this paper, excuse me, is to go into the filter and blur. And the next thing we're going to do is go into the Gaussian blur. We're going to change our radius to approximately 0.9, 0.81. Any of that is just about right for what we're planning to do. You can see over here that what it did was it blurred that noise a bit. I'm going to click OK. So now what we have here is a reasonable facsimile of charcoal paper. So I'm going to go back to the layer that's on top. I'm going to turn that layer back on. And we're going to go into the blending mode, and we're going to go into multiply. I was in the wrong box. So let me go back, shut that off, go back to normal. And now we're in the proper layer. And I'm going to select multiply, and here we go. We have our drawing, our red chalk drawing on charcoal paper. So that's a pretty big difference right there from the original pencil sketch from the sketchbook. But we want to just take it a little bit further than what you see here in front of us. So the next thing we're going to do is start picking out some of the highlights. Like I said, this isn't going to be a highly refined drawing. What it's going to be is just something that you can show the clients to give them an idea of the direction that the characters that you've designed, what they're going to look like. So the next thing we're going to do, we'll go back into the color picker. I don't want to go with a purely white chalk. I think that it's a little harsh. We'll get something really close to white, but something that's a little bit warmer. So I think this is a good color, what we selected right now. And the next option we're going to go is we're going to select brush. So the brush tool is now selected, and we're going to select the brush. Now the thing about Photoshop, it comes with many different brush choices, and what I'm going to select now is a brush that resembles chalk. You can see when I put the cursor over that number 36, it says chalk, and we're going to select that brush. And as as I was saying before, this comes with Photoshop default brushes, so it's nothing that you have to create, nothing you have to buy. It already comes with it. You'll also see that it's set at 36 pixels. That's a bit small for what we're working on now, so I'm going to just increase the size of the brush. And all right, so we'll go with the diameter of about I don't know, we have about 76. Okay, so this is good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to just enlarge this drawing for now. Makes it much easier to work from. And we're going to go back to the brush, and we're going to just start. Before we go any further than this, I want to make sure that our opacity level is set much lower. In order to mimic the feel and look of chalk, I want to do a slow build-up of the white highlights. So I've got the chalk now set to about 30. The flow I'm going to leave where it is. And the next step is I'm going to create a blank layer. So we have another layer here, and I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay. And what you're going to see in this tutorial is when we're creating layers that have a lighter color, and we want to create the effect of a lighter color, you want to keep your blending mode to overlay. And when you want to use darker or more intense colors, you would put your blending mode to multiply. So as I was saying, we have the overlay selected, we have our brush, it's at 30% opacity. So now I'm just going to start picking out some areas on the drawing that I want to pop a bit. You could see I'm not trying to color in this drawing like you would a coloring book. I'm just trying to very roughly lay in some highlights so that the drawing itself begins to take on a more three-dimensional look to it. And you can see as I go over and over with the chalk, it becomes more intense, the white. Like I said, I'm not concerned with staying in the lines. What I'm concerned with is just building form. And right now, like I said, it's I'm just trying to pop some of the areas that are closer to the eye. And we're going to create another layer after this that will be that will concern itself more with light. So I'm just going to continue. You can see I'm moving pretty fast. Even if I'm coming outside my lines, you could see over here that happened. Doesn't matter. Like I said, this is meant to feel spontaneous. So if something pops out a little bit from the lines, we're not going to worry about it too much. If it was something that that was glaringly wrong with it, all we would need to do is go into the eraser and just erase some of that color back. But like I said, this is not something that I'm too worried about with a drawing like this. So as you can see, this is the first layer, and I began to pop some white. I'm going to create another layer now, and it's basically another layer, empty layer, and I'm going to go once again to overlay. And I'm not going to change the color of the chalk. What I'm doing is I'm building up another highlight layer. This time I'm more concerned with light and where the light is hitting our subject. And so what I'm going to do is, I figure it's going to be here towards the front and in this right-hand side. And like I said, it's not going to be scientific. Um, I just trying to lead the viewer's eyes um, to the parts of the drawing that I feel are important um, for the viewer. So you can see here that I've begun to build up some areas much more intense with the highlights. As I was saying before, the beauty of Photoshop is its ability to um, create many layers, and that really gives you a lot of control over your image, and also gives you control over whether, if you make mistakes, um, it's so easy to just go back and change the mistakes you've created. So you could see I went a little bit overboard there with the white. I didn't want it quite so much there on the line. So just like I said, roughly trying to pick out the areas of the drawing that I believe the highlights would hit. I'm going to just see what the drawing is beginning to look like. You can see it's already looking pretty good. The dimensions it's looking very three-dimensional. The next thing I'm going to do is I just want to put a little bit more information. Like I said, this is not going to be a finished illustration. It's just meant to show some information to the client. So another thing that's important for this character would be the color of his hair. So in keeping with the original ideas behind this character, he has red hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another blank layer, and I'm going to go back to overlay. So that layer is overlay, and I'm going to select reasonable red for the character's hair, and once again using the same chalk, the same brush, I'm going to just quickly pop a little color into the character's hair. As I was saying before, we don't want to saturate this drawing with a lot of color. What we're just trying to do is put some visual information so that the client has an idea of where you're going with your character. So I believe that's enough color so that the client gets an idea that this boy has red hair. And I'm going to put another piece of information in on this drawing, and what I want to do is he's looking very white, and I don't want him to look quite so dead, and I don't want to start overcoloring this drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer, and once again I'm going to go into the overlay for its blending mode, and I'm just going to put a little blush in on the flesh. So I'm going to select a blush color. Once again, I'm going to stay with the same brush. I'm going to stay with the same opacity of approximately 30, and I'm just going to start putting a little bit of color into the subject's cheeks, maybe a little on his nose, a little on the lips. Basically the areas on the figure that would warm him up a little bit. Like I said, I don't want to go full on color. Just a little bit on the hands, especially around the fingertips, flesh. Like I said, it's just to give it a little bit of life. Um, One more piece of information that I would like to include on this before we finish this drawing is I want to work a little bit more on his eyes. Usually that's the focus on character drawing, is the character's eyes, and I want the viewer to focus there just a little bit. Not I don't want to go overboard with it, so I'm going to create another layer. And once more, in this layer, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select a white, and what I want to do is, I'm going to go with the overlay blending mode. What I want to do is make his eyes pop a little bit more, and this brush is way too large now. We're working in much smaller details, so I'm going to go with approximately 17 pixels. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm going into the whites of his eyes, and I'm not making them pure white because that wouldn't be right for any character, actually, because the eyes fall into shadow. But I did want to draw a little bit of attention to it, so I'm adding some white, and the next thing I'm going to do is add some color to the eye itself. Now, I've selected a green, and I'm not going to put this on another layer because there's so little information on this layer. I'm just going to stay in here, and I'm going to put that green into the subject's eyes. Okay, and I believe we're pretty much finished with our character, and so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to create another one soon.